So we are meeting on this rather ominous day. It is the day after we are all nursing hangovers of one sort or another, whether it's sleep deprived or some kind of alcoholic stupor following yesterday's election result. But not everyone is sitting around renting their garment. Some people are in action, and I'm delighted to be joined by Axel and Chuck, two people who were already thinking about how to engage with the new incoming American administration and how, of course, to support Ukraine. Chuck, what's your mood today?
I'm one of those people who like to think that the national security apparatus of the United States still realizes that Russia is, as they call themselves, as they call us, the perennial foe. There's no way that allowing Russia to dominate Ukraine, that's not in the interests of the United States, and it's a clear and present danger to its European allies. Uh, the other thing that I think is, and maybe I am incredibly naive, and maybe I'm incredibly hopeless in my aspirations. I have a hunch that Trump was willing to throw a big tent over the lunatic fringe who don't see the fight in Ukraine the way that you and I and Axel do. Those people are isolationist, they are reactionary, and I'm hoping that better sense will prevail in Washington.
And it would have been a challenge in any case, even if Harris had got in, reaching out to her national security team, cutting through their ideological stance, their model of the world, which, as we saw with the so-called Sullivan Doctrine, from the point of view of those who know Russia well, seem to not align at all with how it behaves, how it thinks, what its aspirations are. And of course, in managing or seeking to manage escalation, it's actually put us on this almost inextricable path of the escalation sort of moving far away from our control. Do you think the Trump administration is potentially going to work on a very different model of the world and a model of how Russia works?
Well, there's one thing that I do worry about, and that is the incoming president's overconfidence in his ability to negotiate with anyone. I think that he may misapprehend what negotiating with a tyrant like Putin actually means. This is not a real estate deal. This is not getting one up on your negotiation adversary. The fate of a nation hangs in the balance, the nation of Ukraine. But also, there's no way people cannot realize that the security of Europe is what's at stake here. I don't think that President Trump is going to get one over on Vladimir Putin. He's not a person who can be persuaded. You cannot show him the light. He is not going to come to Jesus as a result of speaking to President Trump. The other thing that I say a lot, it sounds difficult, aspirational, but what must happen in Ukraine is Russia's armed forces must be defeated. You must take the hammer, the cudgel, the machete. You've got to take that out of Putin's hands so he can't do this again. Because if there is victory, Chechnya has shown us he will do it again.
No peace agreements, because every peace agreement will be broken. No ceasefires, because every ceasefire is a pause for them to regroup and rearm and become stronger again. No lifting of sanctions, because lifting of sanctions would mean that what has already happened, meaning the hollowing out of the sanctions regime, will then be legalized and therefore become literally completely ungovernable. So the question is, are there enough people who can penetrate what is supposedly the shield by the elder of the Trump sons of his father from unwanted infiltration by what they consider to be rhinos and whatnot, and all sorts of things? They are very clannish. They are very resistant to guidance. McMaster said he felt used and squeezed out as a national security advisor. Are there people? Do you believe that there will be people who can actually bring that home to him? I mean, Pompeo, Cotton. I mean, Who are these people who we should engage with?
Well, that's a question. I don't know. You go from the very likely the greatest president the United States has ever had, Abraham Lincoln, governing during the most trying period of our nation, the American Civil War, and he surrounded himself and his cabinet with people who did not agree with him because he wanted the best information possible. So, am I comparing Abraham Lincoln to Donald Trump? Well, I sure don't think I am. So, that is worrisome. Look, there is even consensus among the national security figures in the United States, of which I am a very, very tiny voice without much reach or grab, or even anyone listens to me. But I talk to my peers, and the consensus is that Russia is a burgeoning threat to Europe. It is, and lest us not forget, Ukraine is a European nation.
And of course, added to that, we have North Korean soldiers on the territory of Europe. You will have North Korean soldiers that are helping in the erasure of European cities, European identity, a sovereign European democracy. It seems to me that a couple of decades ago, people would have lost their minds over this and it would have evoked an extremely strong response. Now it's happening with barely a whimper. What's the risk here in your view? Why are we at this place? And actually, this sort of 8 to 10,000 North Korean soldiers, could this just be the first tranche of potentially tens, if not hundreds of thousands?
Well, I have a piece coming out towards the end of this week for the Kyiv Post discussing what is the state of North Koreans' intervention in the war. Here's one of the things I think that brought us to this place. North Korea actually intervened in the war in late 2023. That is when they started launching ballistic missiles from Ukrainian occupied territory against Ukrainian cities. The world shrugged it off. In the last 10 days, it's come to the fore that North Korean troops are, in fact, deployed to Kursk, that they have been in military contact with Ukrainian forces. And here's what I think happened. The president, Joe Biden, thought, next week, this isn't going to be my problem, so I'm not going to do anything. Kamala Harris, she said, well, this isn't my problem yet. I'm not going to do anything. And same with the Trump campaign. I'm afraid, sometimes I hate to be right, but I said that 3 months ago, that nothing was going to happen in American foreign policy, probably until next April. And whoever is the new president, in this case, Trump, he's going to take 90 days to get his feet under him in terms of national security affairs.
And even then, the result may be an uptick in support for Ukraine. It may be a complete secession of that support. Certainly, if we listen to the language of Vance, Kennedy, and some of those in the inner circle, actually, I don't know if they're in the inner circle, but you know what I mean, in that sort of Trump donut, as it were. If we take their words at face value, then it's a fair assumption that aid will be cut off at the knee.
Well, I certainly hope not. Uh, your assessment is more valid than mine. And mine is Trump allowed portions of his campaign to say the things that appealed to the isolationist right wing. I can only hope that, because I don't see how it is in America's interest to watch this nation be obliterated by Russia. I don't see it. Russia is not part of the global community. They are an aggressive
It's not a
imperial
relevant
power.
trading partner, and it's not an even relevant trading partner for the US. It has been a relevant supporting or secondary trading partner for Europe in terms of natural resources and the likes, but it has not been a relevant trading partner for the US. It has the ISS with the US. Thank you very much. You can rebuild that dang thing. You don't need them for it. You don't need them for the rockets anymore. That's gone. They have some nukes. So what? You have more nukes. Many other people have nukes. So what? So it doesn't matter. Is there a competition for natural resources of eastern parts of Russia and also Kazakhstan with China? Absolutely, there is. But in terms of trading partners, who's the most important trading partner for technology and for manufacturing of the US? Europe. Where does most part of the US come from? Europe. Who is culturally disposed to be with the US and fight with the US? Britain, which is still part of what we would call Europe, even if it's not part of the EU. So as a consequence, we have a transatlantic bridge which exists and which we need to defend. The question is, how do we get this into the how do we get this around this little barking dog, his eldest son? I apologize, I have to make a statement, but somebody has to say this because it's insane what I'm reading from his interviews recently. And yes, it doesn't help our case if we say that he is behaving in this regard, but he is unfortunately stating these things, that there are people from outside the circle who want to corrupt and manipulate the president. He will not allow it. And he brought Vance in order to stop this. And also, Ukraine should not be supported because this is all gone. The statement that this is all gone is a talking point his son had brought up. I think it's in late March, and he continues as done so. The infiltration of the Trump family by people who provided Russian talking points to them because it was beneficial to them, I don't know why, is massive. And as McMaster, and this is my argument, and there comes the question with it, as McMaster said, the last person who comes into the room and talks to him in a sensible, clear, precise, short, for him acceptable, summarized format has the benefit of being taken into account more than anyone who has briefed him before, no matter what he decided before. That is not necessarily good or boding well. It actually bodes very ill. So
the goldfish strategy, essentially.
Yes. Yes. Now, he's not a goldfish. The man is smart. Sure, don't get me wrong. He's absolutely smart. Nobody questions that he's smart. But is he so intelligent that he could actually extrapolate what he has gained as his smarts and his cunning and all those things, that he can transpose them to now wield power more responsibly and more effectively in the interest of both freedom and, of course, the United States of America, for which he has become elected. I mean, he has been elected by a majority of he has won the popular vote, if I'm not quite mistaken. He's won a majority for himself in the White House. He is now seemingly on his coattails, and whilst the Senate campaign has been very effective, the senators, there's a Senate majority of 3 seats. It seems that the House actually that there's a House majority as well. He's won the election. Since 2016, he has finally won another election, because all the other ones he lost, midterms and the presidential election. So he's won an election, which is a pendulum swing, and it's a rejection of the policies, not necessarily foreign policy, but domestic policies and economic policies of the Biden administration. So he's won that. Now he has to be taken seriously. The question is, how will it be possible to address that with him?
Well, there are some things that have occurred recently that may help persuade him. For example, a plot to sabotage transatlantic cargo flights. That's not something that a nation should shrug off. And
yes,
interestingly, it's getting almost no coverage in the United States at all. Had Al-Qaeda done it, had Hezbollah done it, had the Houthis done it, there might be more of a reaction. So I don't know why the United States.
So you mean ABC? But this is, again, it's the whole media setup. It's everyone. It's not just Fox. It's not just Newsmax. It's not just those guys. No. This is all of them. Other than in the Wall Street Journal, where this was front page news, by the way, yesterday, and when it came out. Other than the Wall Street Journal, I haven't seen anything.
That's it. Me neither. There's something that needs to be examined. There are also a string of acts of sabotage in Europe, Norway, Germany, in the Baltics, assassination attempts, some so crudely and heavy-handed. A guy on a bicycle riding up to someone in a cafe, shooting him in the head, and then throwing the gun in the canal adjacent to the crime scene. When he's arrested, biometrics instantly revealed that his valid Russian passport is issued to a known criminal on an Interpol watch list. This guy was an expendable asset for the FSB. They shrug it off. This was treated like a crime rather than an intelligence operation behind an assassination. Again, you can't move the media. They
And I think
have an agenda.
this
Yes,
is
they have
quite clear,
inertia.
isn't it? That the media are getting their cue from government. And if government are choosing to sit on these stories, underplay them for whatever reason, the media can only run with it so far. And many of them won't take that risk and go out on a limb on that. And that's again comes back to leadership and lack of leadership and choices that are being made to underplay the global nature of Russia's campaign.
Well, there is a name for the sort of government arrangement that controls the media, and this word is rather overplayed, but the name for that kind of government is called fascism. Government involved in high-level business affairs, dealing with a class of plutocrats and controlling the media. Ask Benito Mussolini how that works. Ask Adolf Hitler. Ask Quisling. Ask any true fascist, and they will tell you that's their dream job. And unfortunately, we are talking about the media of our own democracies. The three of us live in democracies, but the media, and it's been that way, I'm sorry to say, for almost 2 decades now. It's been that way.
I think that I do remember the questions Sam Donaldson and people brought into the debates of Ronald Reagan. Both was Carter as well as against Mondale later. There was a different who asked the one against Mondale after us. But I do remember the tone and the tenor, and it was always it was disparaging. The tone was always as if, oh, this communism thing overblown, the threat overblown, SDI, a child's dream, all that kind of jazz. I do remember the tone. I do remember the details. And Hedrick Smith wrote a book about it, about Washington Congress, and he highlighted that it's not in the best interest of the politicians there, whilst they want to allocate pork and exert power, to have the media follow on to what the real threats are. Because if the society were to consider the real threats, it would act completely differently. Compare this to Finland. My loving example is always Finland. The resilience of the total defense concept, the awareness of every single Finnish school child that there is the bear, and we have to be wary of it. Comes back to the JEF, comes back to NATO, comes back to readiness for defense. We have to be ready, and we have to tell our electorates, our audience, what's going on. By the way, the funny part is this is back and forth between your issue over there, over the pond in America, with alternative media on the one hand, which tries to find a niche and to find ways to penetrate the media mainstream. I understand why this came, but then alternative media, as it was called, was co-opted by the crazies. Look at Andrew Breitbart. What happened? In his name, there's crazies of Mr. Bannon and others waging war. It's insanity. Andrew Breitbart was not insane. His concept of drilling into those, the soft underbelly of the media was correct, because they were the pendulum that swung the wrong way. But we here are a minuscule, small, low audience number approach against it. But if we don't do it, we will be the ones who later on will have, when asked, say that, no, we didn't do anything against it. And that's the consequence out of, at least from a German perspective, or from a continental European perspective. If you fail to stand up and be counted when it matters, then you're nothing. People in Italy went to concentration camps, were lined up, hanged, and shot by the fascists. They were also hanged, by the way, and shot by the communist partisans afterwards, by the way. But apart from that, Central Eastern Europe has lived and suffered through this. Nazi German occupation, Soviet occupation, gulags, concentration camps. Ukraine was the battleground for large parts of Army Group South and, to an extent, Army Group Center, and the Soviets. They suffered. The Einsatzgruppen were everywhere. The whole of Europe was lit up in fire. This cannot be in the best interest of the United States of America. This cannot be in the interest of trade, reciprocal engagement, free democracies. And that is the thing with the isolationists. And I do hope that you're right, Chuck, that this big tent argument was there to win his election again. But often enough, the isolationist argument has been made by Mr. Trump. When he gets his feels, his moments where he expresses emotion and feelings, and I'm sure as a human being he will have them, it seems that he becomes a different person again. And then he's very, he's close to being effeminate in that regard. And he's very empathic and says, oh, yeah, no, we need to do something. But he spoke to the politicians, he spoke to Zelensky and hugged him and whatnot, all that kind of jazz, just very recently. He has spoken to many politicians worldwide. He unfortunately feels more comfortable. I don't know why. Maybe, Jonathan, you can explain this to me, what the psychological basis is for feeling so attached to authoritarians and strong leaders, which evidently, and generals and projection of authority. I don't know where this comes from, but this is not a time. This is not a time in world history where we can allow ourselves to be passive. This is not a time where emotions can overrun. This is not a time where we can fail to fight. We have to be very calm and fight. He says he wants to end wars. Fine, I agree with him. Completely in agreement. But in order to end them, you have to fight and win them.
And that's something which is, at the moment, we have no clear answer to that. Well, there's maybe a couple of, topics we can queue up for next time. One is not just the sort of, I would say, disengagement of the traditional media, but the injection of social media into the piece, where you're no longer debating different flavors of rationality, but you're debating reality and something that's completely made up. I think that's one of the other challenges there. And I think we should probably discuss, what it is about authoritarians that is so attractive to someone who's come from the world of business, especially New York property, like Trump. There's something definitely that aligns with his worldview. There's a simplicity, and perhaps he understands the rules on how they operate. Whereas traditional career politicians, it's the way you dress, the way you speak. You need to learn a whole set of rules and conventions that he's not comfortable of and doesn't see the point in them. But that's maybe something to dissect. Let's give Chuck the last word on this. We don't want to end the episode in despair. What should people do if they want to support Ukraine and they want to make sure that Ukraine is front and center of the new administration's policies?
No, I think the opinion of the man and woman on the street in the United States is vastly in favor of Ukraine. People who don't need to be reminded that Ukraine did everything it possibly could to avoid this war. There was no casus belli. They didn't provoke Russia. They simply were invaded, first by hybrid means, and this war's been going on for more than a decade. First, it was a hybrid invasion of little green men and deniable operations. Then Russia built $1 billion bridge connecting Crimea and ran up a different flag in front of the post office. That isn't right. That isn't right. It isn't right when 98% of your precision strike munitions hit cities. This is a clear-cut case of what is right and just and what is evil. And I still have a great deal of hope in the people of the United States. But get together, express your will. It costs you 32 cents to write to your congressman. email him for free. Your words are read by your senators, by your representatives. I have a good friend, we do, Alan Brewer, who was worked on the Hill for a senator. Every morning, the chief of staff puts last night's mail-in messages front and center in front of your elected officials. Make your voice heard.
That's a great place to end. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll be following up on many of these issues in the coming days and weeks.